All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode here of your go-to Pacers podcast. And the Indiana Pacers fall in game 4 once again by 3 points, 105-102 to the Boston Celtics. The Boston Celtics get the 4-0 series sweep, and they are moving on to the NBA Finals for the second time in 3 years. Congratulations to the Boston Celtics with Facci. Pacers right there again, fought all the way down to the wire, just could not close it out in the clutch, which we've seen 3 times in this series. And just as a Pacer fan, I think you got some PTSD watching this team being unable to close games out. But it was just great to see, I think, overall, just the competitive level that this team fought with all series.
They were competitive. I know it's easy to say, what do you mean they were competitive? They got swept. They were in it, and it's not just they were in it. There was 3 games in this. 3 out of those 4 games, Indiana had a 90% chance to win the game in the fourth quarter. But in this game, it was Boston that once again made the plays that they needed to make, those championship type plays, those offensive rebounds, the Jaylen Brown block on Andrew Nembhard, things like that kept Boston in this game and chipping away at the lead. It was Indiana that went scoreless for the final 3 minutes and 32 seconds of this game. There were opportunities, but Indiana simply could not capitalize on any of them.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. And I mean, you look at this Boston Celtics team, they've got 2 All-Stars in Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, 2 guys that have been All-NBA recently. Then you got 2 All-NBA defenders in Drew Holiday, Derek White, Al Horford, who's been in the league for 17 years, but just knows how to keep his body in good shape and such a factor for this team. And they were doing all this without Kristaps Porzingis, who was a big acquisition for them in the offseason. So a lot of like great talent on this Boston team. And I think it would have been a bigger shame if they had, not won this series than anything else the Pacers have faced. So I think Boston clearly, I mean, everybody knew they were the better team going into this. Nobody expected Indiana to beat them. We got called, not loyal to our fans. We're not loyal fans because we picked Boston to win the series. I just think that if you looked on paper and you looked at like how they played all year long, like this is the team to beat. And it was going to be an uphill battle, whether Tyrese Halliburton played or not. We saw in games 1 and 2 how difficult it was to win against this team. They just have a lot of great players, so I'm giving them a lot of credit. But I will say this: Manu Ginobili, Facci, on Twitter tweeted this out. Boston had a big advantage in both talent and experience, but Indiana put up a great fight. They deserve a lot of credit. And I think that what's gotten lost in the shuffle, maybe not with analysts and those that actually cover basketball for a living, but for those casual fans that have been constantly in our mentions talking down on the Pacers, saying this was a fraud run, get those front runners out, whatever. I mean, I'm just going to address it because I know there's a lot of Twitter supporters on our podcast that have seen this. Those that actually know what they're talking about when it comes to basketball know that this Pacers team, they deserve to be here. They competed their butts off, and they really did prove that they can hang with the best of the best, like the Boston Celtics. Could they beat them in the 7-game series? No, clearly not. They showed it in this series already, but the fact that they could hang with them down to the wire in multiple games, to me, justifies how talented this Pacers team is and how special they were this season. As Rick Carlisle said at the beginning of his press conference, this magical run.
Look, everybody in the state of New York has unleashed upon me and just saying sweep, sweep, a lot of Knicks fans and stuff like that. Everybody that the Pacers eliminated throughout the playoffs, they were invested in this series just to see our downfall. But here's the thing. This is Boston's 5th trip to the conference finals in the last 7 years. Look how many times they couldn't get over the hurdle and into the NBA finals. This is only the 2nd time out of those 5 trips that they're making it the NBA Finals. So it shows this does not happen overnight. You need to learn and grow from this. People forget, actually, Boston was down 3-0 last year before they won 3 straight, forced to Game 7. That losing there probably fueled their whole offseason to come back and say, we're winning a championship. If you're the Pacers, this experience was priceless. A run to the conference finals, the lumps that they took along the way over here, game winners where they did execute perfectly, a few games where they absolutely did not execute down the stretch. I think everybody had a little bit of blame to take in this series and be able to come back better from it. This offseason, this Pacers team now has expectations way bigger than what they had coming into this season. I think now that this team says, hey, we had Boston. For in a couple games, we just couldn't finish the deal in the conference finals. Now we expect that we are good enough to be able to make a deep run next year when you have a healthy Tyrese Halliburton, when you have a healthy Benedict Mathurin, when you have Jarris Walker giving you contributions. There's a lot to be happy about. Right now, in this moment, it is okay to be a little bit down. I am hurt. Once the Pacers went down 3-0 in the series, to be honest, I think it probably cushioned the blow a little bit. I didn't think this was a team of destiny at that point. At 3-0 in the NBA, never been done before. But what I saw was fight from this team, and for that, I can be proud.
I think game one kind of set the tone for this playoff series against Boston in the Eastern Conference Finals. Blowing that game one lead when you basically had the game in your hands. It felt like when you let that one go, that it was like, okay, how are they going to recover from this?
Agree.
Now, I will say this: when Tyrese Halliburton was ruled out for the rest of game two, and then he was ruled out for games three and games four, I thought, okay, what is going to happen here? I know that Andrew Nembhard has had good moments as the primary ball handler in the starting lineup when Halliburton hasn't played, but like, what is really going to happen? But I think from this series alone, Fachi, you saw kind of that growth from Andrew Nembhard from the beginning versus the Bucks to where he is now, having the confidence that he had. Now, did he make some bad decisions throughout those games? Yeah, you can go back to game three with the Drew Holiday steal that he got trying to push it 1-on-4, but that's also a Rick Carlisle thing with not calling a timeout with a young point guard, and also just knowing like this is a young guy going up against a set Boston defense. And tonight he had some other, disappointing turnovers where he dribbled into traffic, things like that. And those are all learning experiences for a second year player. But the fact that he shot the ball so well, had the confidence to go up against his team and played his butt off on both sides of the court and really took on that challenge, Fachi, without Tyrese Halliburton out there to kind of lead this team offensively and kind of lead this team as the primary ball handler. He showcased to me tonight everything that we've been slamming the table about him for, because I have been preaching all year long like Andrew Nembhard is the guy that should be starting. I fully believed it, and I understand that everybody's high and super excited for Benedict Mathurin. I don't know what their ceilings are going to be. I don't know what their fit is moving forward with this team. You can still say maybe that Mathurin's ceiling is higher, but I'm telling you, it's going to be hard to top what we've seen from Nembhard in this playoff run because of what he did on both sides of the basketball. I just think that Andrew Nembhard really kind of set himself apart and proved to everybody. I mean, even Mike Breen was saying he's a future star of this league. I think everybody was put on Nembhard notice this playoff run, how special of a talent that he actually is.
I was itching to break out that Mike Breen comment. Nembhard not only introduced himself to the nation, but now he has everybody truly saying, "Whoa, Indiana has something special on their hands." They were comparing Andrew Nembhard to the Jalen Brunson situation of this is a
We did that.
guy that
We did that on our last podcast. Carson did. I just want to bring that up.
yeah, it's great. I mean, now a lot of other people are going with it because it's true. It's like this is someone that with an expanded role can offer a lot more. And for Mathurin, he probably does have a higher ceiling, but we don't know if he'll ever reach that ceiling. Andrew Nembhard feels like a sure and steady player that hey, you give him the opportunity, he's going to make the most happen on both sides of the ball on a nightly basis. Right now, there is no scenario I could see of him coming out of the starting lineup. It's like this is someone that the Pacers are lucky to have him under contract for the next 2 years, and I think at this point, someone would be ready to throw a bag at him.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that Andrew Nembhard right now answered every question that any Pacer doubter could have of him, and he was someone that absolutely excelled in games 3 and 4. And I feel like you could be really excited about what's to come for him because, yeah, like you mentioned, this is just year two. He could completely get better this offseason. Rick Carlisle said he's expected to play with Team Canada in the Olympics. I think that experience for him is going to be huge in the offseason. Like, there's a lot to be excited about on this young Pacers team. So, guys, this isn't like our windows shut. There's a big breeze coming through this window right now. It is wide open.
Yeah, there's a lot of things we're going to talk about with the offseason coming up, Fachi. Obviously, we'll have time to dive into all of that. But tonight, we're just kind of reflecting on the season a little bit. Yeah, we could break this game down even more and get into like, oh, well, if this would have happened here, or this would have happened there. I think it's all just a moot point at this point. The season's over. You look at this game, you look at all the missed opportunities once again, not being able to get a rebound when it mattered the most, and then Boston just being able to crash the offensive glass, find guys open in the corners. I mean, they did a really good job of spacing Indiana and getting their hands on a lot of the 50-50 balls. It just felt like Indiana was gassed towards the end of this game. I mean, I don't know how many times Siakam just looked tired in that fourth quarter. McConnell, the same thing. I think him getting hit in the face by Jaylen Brown wasn't ruled a flagrant foul because, uh, unfortunate contact, whatever you want to call that. Zach Zarb, I know he even doubled down on that after in the pool report, but we'll just put it this way: it's one of those things where a lot of things could have gone differently for Indiana, and they win a couple of these games, but they don't. You got to accept it. But overall, I think everyone has to be happy with just the level of play that this team fought with, the compete level of this team, and how we saw them grow so much. Because I don't know how many times I've seen this team with their back against the wall, and they just fight even harder. And I love that about this team. And it felt really fun to, I mean, it was so much fun to cover this team this year, Facci, from the in-season tournament
Blast.
run to where we are now. Nobody expected this at the beginning of the season. We were hopeful that one playoff series would be what we get to cover. The fact that we got to do 3 playoff series, it's just wild to think that Indiana had a chance. They were 4 wins away from making the NBA Finals. Like that's just wild to me, considering where we were at the beginning of the year.
It's true. I mean, this was hands down the most fun that I've had covering this team on this show. It has been a blast. We talked about it a few times. If the Pacers just made the playoffs, that would have been like a good, fun experience. Like, wow, we're talking about meaningful basketball in late April, early May. Alex, it's almost June, and we're talking about Pacer basketball, meaningful games. That's something we just could have never imagined coming to this season. So I think there was so many highs. There were lows, but this team always managed to find a way to bounce back. If the Pacers had fallen short against the Knicks in game 7, we would have still been very proud about this team and
Yeah.
said, hey, you know what? Look, they showed a lot, but it's like, even though they got swept in the conference finals, we all saw enough to be excited about running it back and not something like in the previous years where it's like, hey, we're a tough out, but let's bring them back. And this, it's like, oh, the same old thing. No, like we know this team has that internal growth that's going to happen over this offseason. There's a lot of young players that are far from reaching their full potential. And, I just think while it wasn't perfect, while you would have loved to have seen Halliburton out there, this team never used anything as an excuse. There at no point did I utter the words like, or anyone else like, well, yeah, I mean, we don't have Halliburton. It's like, no, we played hard. We played hard in those last 2 games. The Pacers played good enough to win. I know they didn't, but that's just sometimes how the ball bounces, the cookie crumbles, whatever cliche statement you want to use in this situation. They couldn't get it done, but they will come back as a better team from this experience. That I couldn't be more confident in.
Yeah, there's a lot more we can get into. I don't want to spend too much time doing this now because we're going to have plenty of off-season time to do this. But one player that I think deserves a lot of shine here right now is TJ McConnell. TJ McConnell, Facci, in the conference finals averaged 15 points per game, 5.5 rebounds, 4.3 assists, and just 24 minutes per game. That is the first player in NBA history to average 15 points, 15 plus points per game in less than 25 minutes in a conference final series alone. TJ McConnell was phenomenal. I mean, you cannot say enough great things about this guy. We were not really sure what to expect from McConnell going into the season. Rick Carlisle wanted to bring him off the bench as a third string point guard, kind of a break the glass in case of an emergency. And that guy ended up becoming a guy that was the most dependable, reliable player on this team at times throughout the year. And I think that TJ McConnell's experience, the way he played, his compete level, his attention to detail, he was just so special for this Pacers team. And you know, I will take a step back and apologize a little bit for what I gave Chad Buchanan a hard time for calling TJ McConnell the heart and soul of this Pacers team in the offseason. And he even said that he kind of agreed with what I was saying. Like, you can't say like your backup point guard's the heart and soul of this team. But I will say that there was moments when he kind of felt like the soul, like the energy of this team was TJ McConnell, the guy that really just brought the goods. And I can't get over how special he's been this season all along, uh, all alone. But like just the fact that he's been so good in the playoffs too. He honestly earned so much more respect for me than I ever had for him before, and probably then some. I think that my respect level for TJ McConnell is through the roof, and I think that he's a guy you cannot afford to let walk away from this team at any means necessary. You got to keep him as a part of this team moving forward. He's a foundational piece.
I'm right there with you in terms of he is beyond earned my respect. I mean, he's one of the guys I'm most excited that the Pacers do have under contract for next year, because there was plenty of times they were saying, "Oh, well, you know what? You could, flip McConnell's contract. It's only half guaranteed or partial guarantee." And then you look at it, it would have been such a crime to move McConnell for a couple second round picks or anything like this. What he brings to this team, you can't replace. There's nobody that gets the crowd going like McConnell. Nobody that gets his teammates going like McConnell. It's just like anyone on this team could hit a three. All right, cool. McConnell hits a three, the building erupts. He dives on the floor for a loose ball. It makes everybody want to play just a little bit harder. He took his game to the next level in the playoffs. He was really good against the Knicks. He was really good against the Celtics. He had some good moments, at times against the Bucks as well. It's just that's one of those players that really, you could just see how much he means to the players, the fan base, everything. And I think that his role with this team should not even remotely be in question coming into next season, like it was this offseason, coming to the year. So I think that McConnell, answered a lot of questions. Another guy I want to give a shout out to, Aaron Nesmith. Aaron Nesmith is one of those guys that was rewarded with a contract at the beginning of the year, and we felt, okay, let's see what you could do. He had to play a bigger role than he probably should have had to play once again as the starting small forward on this Pacers team, but he battled in the playoffs. He took on some really tough assignments at times, guarding Jalen Brunson, guarding Jaylen Brown, or Jason Tatum. Like whoever it was like you threw Aaron Nesmith on him, and I feel like he fought all game long. He had some games tonight. He had the jumper going a little bit. I know it was 4 of 11, but he had a span where he was getting in rhythm, and I felt like at times Aaron Nesmith is someone that is just Nesmith and McConnell. Those are two role players. I know I don't want that to sound harsh. Those are two role players that every single team in the NBA would want on their roster because they make you a better team, and they brought it every single night in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, Nesmith is a guy that this was a personal series for him going up
Oh yeah.
against his team that traded him. And honestly, it's basically almost part of the return of what got Nesmith, Indiana. They got Malcolm Brogdon in that trade. Malcolm Brogdon was a sixth man of the year last year. They were 1 win away from going to the NBA Finals, so they trade Brogdon and Robert Williams to the Portland Trailblazers for Drew Holiday. And I mean, I don't think any of us really thought about this, but when the Bucks acquired Damian Lillard, how it would impact the Eastern Conference, because Drew Holiday going from Portland all of a sudden becomes this huge trade chip, and now they trade him to the Boston Celtics. And I think that he was a difference maker for them, Facci. I think honestly that if you want to say who the real MVP was of this series, I could tell you several times where Drew Holiday made the clutch play for the Celtics to kind of get them through it, like the steal on Nembhard in game 3, the layup that he made, like the offensive rebounds that he grabbed, forcing Tyrese to
28
dribble
points
the
in
ball out of
game one.
bounds. What?
28 points in
Right.
game one. I
Yeah,
mean,
I
it
mean,
was were all over the series.
yeah, I mean, honestly, like I don't think the Bucks realized what they were doing when they traded for Dame and how it was going to strengthen the Celtics that much more. Because when they lost Marcus Smart for Porzingis, I thought they were going to miss that perimeter defense. I know they had Derek White, but being able to have White and Drew out there together is just like so special. But anyway, back to Nesmith. I mean, this is a guy that he like over exceeded expectations once again. Like for like over half the season, this guy was probably the second best player on the Pacers team with his consistency level, defensive level, 3-point shooting, just like doing all the little things you wanted. I think as more playoffs, as the playoffs went on more and more, he had to kind of evolve his game, and he became more than a 3-and-D guy. His defense on Brunson was phenomenal, and it really won the Pacers that series. But not only that, when his 3-point shot wasn't falling because it wasn't good, I don't think in the playoffs, just off memory. Now the percentages might be wrong, but it just felt like he struggled quite a
It
bit.
wasn't.
He really developed that 2-point pull-up shot about 18 feet out, 17 feet out. And I thought it was great. So to me, it's like, you know what? I'm going to give a lot of respect to Nesmith for growing and adjusting his game overall, because these moments like this, he's a guy that's going to learn from it, be hungrier than ever to get better from it. I don't know if he's the long-term answer at the starting small forward position moving forward, Facci. I know we'll get to that later, but I do think that he is a guy that is a long-term piece of this Pacers roster.
And I think that that's the thing. Look, we lost this series, but you saw that we have a lot of the right pieces,
Mm-hmm.
like the Nesmiths and the McConnells and the Nembhards and like Ben Shepherd and his evolution of, going from a guy that wasn't even expected to play to starting in conference finals. Like bringing in Siakam was a major, major piece. Turner had some awesome moments in the playoffs. We'll see what happens with Obi. That's another thing we'll get in the offseason. But it's just like this Pacers team showed all throughout the playoffs, depth was one of their strengths. And, I know that towards the end, that depth kind of disappeared a little bit. You don't have Halliburton out there, and you didn't have, Mathurin to begin with, but they have a lot of the right pieces. And I think that they're on the right track. And I think that at times, a lot of different players stepped up. I mean, against the Knicks, like I mentioned, they were 0.1 point away from having 7 players averaging double figures. And that had never been done before in NBA history. So I think at this point, it's like, hey, it might not have been every night, but there always was someone that picked up the slack for someone else. And many teams were very reliant on 1 or 2 players. That wasn't the case for Indiana. I know they came up short in this series, but I do think that there's a lot here to be excited about. And this sting or this wound, it will heal soon. And I don't want this to be lost in like, we got swept. What are you talking about? Like, guys, let's
Yeah.
take a step back. Let's remember where this team was a year ago, 2 years ago, anything like that. These rebuilds like this, they don't happen overnight. It doesn't take a year. It doesn't take 2 years. It takes a while. We're ahead of schedule.
And I'll just say this: enjoy this moment for what it is, because everybody thought when the Atlanta Hawks made the Eastern Conference Finals and they took the Bucks to a 6-game series, like they were
Yeah.
going to be back here again the next year. Like they were just going to be this team that was going to be a force to be reckoned with in the Eastern Conference because of Trae Young and his rise. They haven't been back since, and they've had their ups and downs, and they try to make these trades to get really better. They've had whatever you want to call it. So they've had their rough patch now of trying to figure out who they are as a team and how they make themselves better and things like that. So, you know, getting to the Eastern Conference Finals is not something that happens on the regular for a lot of teams. So for the Pacers to get here, I think you should just be like, man, this was such a fun run. Like, I want you to truly appreciate all that it took for this team to get here. Yeah, there are injuries to other teams like that, but if you want to listen to somebody give a good quote, who better than the guy that won the Eastern Conference Finals MVP, Jaylen Brown, when asked post game by Jay King of the Athletic, he said, This is what Jaylen Brown said about the Indiana Pacers. He said, I know people think that Indiana wasn't a good team or whatever the case may be, but I thought they were as tough as anybody we played all season. They were physical, they were fast, they put a lot of pressure on us. So shout out to them and respect to them. They did sweep us. We didn't get a win on them, but for their MVP of this series to say that they were as tough as anybody they played all season long, that's a nod of respect to this Pacers roster for how hard they played. You talked about it. I mean, it was a great season, Facci. And I mean, I don't want to be too kumbaya here because it's like I'm not looking at where the areas that need to be fixed because I'm saving that for other stuff. But I'm looking big picture here. And I honestly, like, any loss to Boston, I never got upset about. Like, even if they were in the moment where we lost by 2 or 3 points, like, I was never just like, "Oh my god, I can't believe we blew that." It was just like, "Dang it, that sucks." And it's like we move on from it. It was more like disappointed that we didn't get the result that we wanted, but like more accepting of it than anything else. And I think part of it is just the level of opponent they played was so good, and you didn't see flopping, foul baiting, a bunch of, mouth running, dirty stuff. Like it was just basketball that was played, and that was really fun for me to watch.
Game 1 hurt. Game 1 really hurt me because I felt like that was the one that was most in our hands.
Yeah, for sure.
Game 2, I was able to live with, and it was like, okay, you know what? Indiana wasn't really much of a threat in the second half or anything like that. Game 3, the Pacers definitely could have and should have won it, but I knew you had no Tyrese out there. I thought they had played better than anyone really could have expected them, even though I predicted them to win Game 3, and I still felt really good about that until the end. But yeah, and this is another one where I don't know. I think I had set myself up for some heartbreak in this game because the way that Boston just kept always clawing back throughout this series, I just never felt like a lead was safe. And it's nice to hear Jaylen Brown say that. And look, you look at that team, it's everything that you mentioned. The NBA accolades are all across the board. They have some of the best players in the NBA. Jason Tatum is a potential face of the league one day in a future MVP. Jaylen Brown is the highest paid player of all time. They have their defensive studs. They're a really, really good team. And Indiana gave them, honestly, everything that they could handle. I know this didn't go to 7 games, but it doesn't mean that they weren't a shot or two away from Indiana either leading the series or being tied or whatever it may be. So there are some positive things to pat ourselves on the back about. That there are. Well, yeah, we don't need to go all kumbaya like you said, but I just think that it's like, hey, just appreciate it. Appreciate this run. This was just like we mentioned, a really, really fun season. I feel really good about the Pacers, but it wasn't going to go on forever. It wasn't. I mean, it's just, I know there isn't. You look at what the Mavs are doing. No one expected the Mavs to be on this run. That's awesome. That's great. The NBA, what it is showing is the NBA is wide open right now. It really is. They're going to be crowning a new champion, and it feels good to be in this run right now compared to when the Cavs and the Warriors faced off every year and you felt like we never get back there. The NBA is open for the taking right now, and the Pacers will be back.
Yeah, I definitely think they will. It'll be interesting to see how everything shakes out because we've heard that there's going to be a lot of movement once again in the offseason. So, what Indiana decides to do, I think, is going to be very interesting. Do they look at this run and say, man, we're just one player away from really getting to the NBA Finals? Or do they say, you know what? We caught a few breaks here. Maybe we probably wouldn't have made the finals or the East Finals had, Giannis been healthy and all the Knicks players been healthy in those series. So maybe we're not as far ahead as we thought we were. So, I mean, there's a lot of ways they can look at this and just try to be realistic because you mentioned it earlier. Ben Mathurin, Jarris Walker, two young players that were not a part of this playoff run. If you expect them to be a part of this team moving forward and like what is their role going to be, who is out of the rotation, that kind of stuff. I mean, it's all very interesting. So there's a lot to dive into, but as a whole, like you saw growth from Ben Shepherd. You saw Pascal Siakam kind of fit that second star next to Tyrese Halliburton. You saw Tyrese Halliburton go through the ups and downs of what it takes to be a star and lead your team in the playoffs. Like he had his moments and he had his, he had his blunders. He had his moments where it was not good and his moments where they were great. And then you look at Turner, who had some really high highs in the playoffs and some really low lows. So it's just everything is just, it's all about taking it and just kind of looking at it from a distance and just saying, you know what, I can nitpick every little thing in every game about every player if I really want to. But if I'm going to be honest, I just think, man, what a heck of a season. That's all I can say. That's kind of where I'm at this point. I'm not sad. I'm not mad. I'm actually glad that it lasted this long. It was a lot of fun to be on this podcast pretty much daily, talking about the next game, the series, different people, going back and forth with fans on social media. I like it. I am never going to get nasty or stupid with anybody. I will make little jokes here and there just to pick at people if they're going to be nasty and have fun in my mentions. But it's all love. It's all basketball. It's trash talk. It's what it's about. But this Pacers team, it was a ton of fun. Facci didn't win the in-season tournament, didn't make it to the NBA Finals, but wow. 100 games played this year, Facci. Episode 900 for us. Just a lot to be excited about.
The big 900. I mean, we can't bury the lead. I mean, look, there would have been no better way to have episode 900 than with a win. But at the same point, you can't bury it. 900 episodes deep. I mean, this season, I can't even imagine how many episodes we logged. I mean, we gave you guys everything we had.
Yeah.
I mean, shout out to our wives who really put up with a lot this year because I mean there was late games in season tournaments where my wife probably thought I was making up the rules like nah babe we don't know who we're playing next we got to keep going. There was so many things that we were extending it, we're winning game sevens, it's going on. Like we had one extra month of real content this year. Typically before, I mean, Alex and
Almost
I
a month and a half.
almost about a month and a half. You and I had started, the draft lottery talk like early on in other seasons. This was a real season with a lot on the line at all times. It was a lot of fun. I am more happy than I am sad. I'm happy for what I saw. And if you ask me any other way, I wouldn't have wanted to, go out in another round. We got swept. Yeah, well, you know what? Whatever. It's a different sweep than the Nate McMillan days where you couldn't get a win, period, in the playoffs. So for this, hey, it is what it is. But at the same point, I'm glad that this run happened. It's something that we will always look back on and remember. We do it all the time. We've talked about this. People still reference that 2017, 2018 team, the conference finals from 2013, 2014. People will reference this run in 2024 for years to
Yep.
come. I've said it before, I'll say it again. This is how new fans are made when people hold on to these special memories. And this run right over here will be incredible for the outlook of the Indiana Pacers as it relates to being, nationally televised games next year, and even the perception of players in free agency. That
Mhm.
this run has people saying, "Oh, the Pacers, they might be one piece away." And for that, I don't remember a time where that's really been the perception of the Pacers.
Yeah, they play a really fun style that gets everybody involved, and I think that everybody just kind of like respects the Pacers, even the guys that like the Knicks guys that were talking trash to us, or the Bucks guys that were talking trash. I think everybody, even Patrick Beverly, said on his podcast, like, "Man, Indiana's tough, man. They're a good team." So everybody that Indiana beat along the way talked about them in a positive light. Even the team that beat them in a sweep talked about them in a positive light. So that's good. But you're right. Shout out to the wives, my wife Annie, your wife Amy, and your daughter Maddie. Shout out to her for sharing some of Dad with the podcast. It's tough, especially that first year of being a dad, trying to balance everything. So hopefully, everybody, we gave you guys enough content. I know Facci couldn't always make every episode at times this year, but we just try to find that fair balance and just try to keep it going. But I will say this: it was funny. I come in tonight from the game, and my wife goes, "Are you recording tonight?" I said, "Yeah, it's after game 4." She was like, "Well, I thought you said after losses you were just going to record the next day." I said, "Well," I said, "me and Facci talked about that if we lost on like a Saturday recording or on a Friday night recording on a Saturday morning." I said, "That's not how it's been." I said, "We've lost 3 games in a row in this series and I've recorded after every one. So I don't know where you got that." She goes, "Oh, okay." She's like, "Well, I was hoping we'd go to bed together tonight because I'm going to bed by myself
Yep.
again." So that is just like what it is when you do these podcasts late at night. So shout out to the wives, but shout out to you fans. This has been an awesome season. A lot of great responses to you guys and the interactions we've had on social media and stuff like that. So if you haven't already seen my tweet, I want to thank every single one of you for every episode you listen to, whether you listen to all of them or just like half of them or some on this playoff run. It's been a lot of fun interacting, and hopefully we can continue to grow this podcast and this listenership. And if you want to be a part of the Setting the Pace community, if you want to be a pace setter, we're going to try to do some more interactive things in the summer to get you guys involved. So be on the lookout for that. But Facci, anything else before we wrap this one up?
I just want to thank everybody as well. We got the best listeners in the game right now. I mean, you guys, fuel Alex and I to keep pushing the limits and seeing how do we top, this episode, or what can we do? Which guests can we get on? Anything like that. You guys are really what makes this show special and how we got to episode 900. So thanks a lot. Hoping you stick with us, throughout this off season. Even when there aren't games, there's still going to be a lot to cover for this team, and you never know who might be coming on the show. So we always got a couple tricks up our sleeve. So, bear with us. But at the end of the day, hey, just want to thank everybody that gave us even a minute of their time throughout this season. It meant a lot to us.
Absolutely, Facci. Well, with that being said, let's do our normal routine. Let's wrap it up here by telling everybody where they can find us at on social media.
Absolutely. So you can find us on Twitter at PacersPod STP. You can find Alex on Twitter at Alex Golden NBA. I can be found on Twitter at _FACCI. You can find us on Instagram at PacersPod STP. You can find us on Facebook at Setting the Pace. You can find us on TikTok at Setting the Pace. And Alex, tell them where they can check us out on YouTube.
Ladies and gentlemen, go to youtube.com/setting the pace, a Pacers podcast, where you can find all of our video content. And if you're listening to us on the audio platform, please follow the show and leave us a 5-star rating and review. It does help more and more listeners find this show. And we'll be back tomorrow, ladies and gentlemen, to recap Chad Buchanan's end of season press conference. We'll maybe get a little bit more clarity on what they're thinking long term. But Chad Buchanan, Tyrese Halliburton, they're speaking to the media tomorrow. There's been about 7 or 8 players that spoke with the media after the game tonight to kind of help go through all that. I think Matherin might be speaking to the media tomorrow as well. So just be on the lookout for all that content. But we'll be covering it here for you guys on Setting the Pace. Now the season's over, but the content here on this podcast never stops. You guys know how it is. So thank you all so much for tuning in. We hope you guys have a great rest of your day. But Facci, if you're glad the Pacers made it to the Eastern Conference Finals, unlike the Knicks and the Bucks, then end me with those 3 words.
Let's go, Pacers.